I'm going to start by telling you something very shocking about myself. It was actually so shocking that there were debates for weeks. It so happens that I am a girl. I was born a girl, actually a little princess, and I was the firstborn in my family. But at the time, only boys could be heirs to the throne. So you can imagine all the decision makers in the country going, it's a girl. Now, that wasn't my only challenge growing up, because I'm something called highly sensitive. And that is a normal personality trait amongst 15 to 20% of people. Some scientists say up to 30%. And it's innate, so you're born with it, you inherit it. Now, being highly sensitive is a bit like being an app, downloading emotions and pains from other people all the time, and you process things very deeply. You're light, sound, and smell sensitive. So you can imagine, when I started understanding that our whole society is built on us lying to each other all day, kind of made a stir for me. You know, if I say, how are you? How many of you would go, I'm fine, hands in the air? Be honest. Right. And you do that even if you have quite a bad day, right? And so when people came to me and said, I'm fine, like this, and I would take in their emotions, I would be like, no, you're not fine. You're quite angry or you're stressed. You've had a bad morning, you had a quarrel. And this made me really scared of people, because how could I trust anyone who didn't speak their truth? And this scare escalated when I came into my teens, because then my official duties made me give speeches on stage like this today, and I was suddenly faced with all these scary individuals in front of me as an audience, and this brought me into extreme scare of speeches. Like, it was so bad that my knees would knock together, and I would always have to stand behind a podium to have something to hold on to. And at the same time as this happened, the press started invading my private life, hunting me down 24/7, criticizing me weekly, and I felt that my privacy was gone and I lost control over my life. And what do we do when we get scared? We go into fright, flight, or freeze mode, right? And I froze. I only had a feeling of being very, very happy or very, very sad. There was no bridge between the two. I started distrusting myself and believing what everybody else said, living up to their expectations of who I was. Losing myself even more, feeling lonely, not only because I felt ostracized as a princess, because I wasn't really there for me either. And I went into perfectionism, control, self-criticism. But what saved me were the horses, because with them, I had this heart-to-heart connection that I think maybe most of us want to seek, but we're too busy keeping our masks into place to notice. And so this whole thing lasted for quite some time into my 20s, when my personal journey brought me to the point where I started asking questions. Was I really happy? Did I really want to be where I was? And then I started going inward, and I started listening. And I discovered all these voices. We all have these voices that we listen to. From when we're small, as our parents or our teachers and friends, people we look up to, right? And they're all there in our heads, and we listen to them by habit, and we don't really realize that they're not our own voices. And I call it voices, but I mean, it could be, it's more your intentions, but you don't realize that they're yours. And so when I started listening inwards, I found these voices. And I discovered I didn't even agree with them. And whenever I listened to them, I ended up where they wanted me to be. And the only one suffering was me. But then I listened further, and I found my own whisper amongst all these voices. And you know what happened when I started listening? My life started changing. But I didn't know my life was changing. That was the beauty of it. Because then I would be really scared, because I was a control freak at the time. And I started listening to the small things, and I acted on them, accepting them without questioning them. Just with small things like what clothes to wear that day, what route to take to work, or what food to eat. And I continued listening. And the listening has taken me on a journey beyond my wildest dreams. It's a bit like being on top of the world, like here on TEDxAmsterdamWomen, which is one of our most famous sites in Norway. And it took me far, far into the world and beyond what my mind would think was smart for me to do. I stopped with the horses, because I was on the national team for show jumping at the time. And in addition to having my official duties with the disabled, I started my own way of being a princess. I started a center for people to connect to their truth, their core, teaching them energy readings and healings. I've written 8 books, 5 on spirituality, 2 on highly sensitive people. Just taking me on a journey to all countries in the world, giving speeches. I have 3 startups right now. 1, building the hub for the Norwegian horse world. 1, getting the young people, the youth, into the equation of future business decisions to change the world. And 1, where I take world leaders on expeditions to detach from their normal life and connect to who they truly are, so they too can start listening and changing their lives. And last but not least, it has taken me to be here in front of you and dare to be vulnerable and tell my story. But listening to your inner core, your truth, is not only a dance on roses, to be honest. I mean, because what happens is that you start listening to that and you stop living up to people's expectations, and that kind of triggers people, you know? And so I've had my share of criticism in Norway. You know, people have called me the devil. They've called me, you know, shaming my family, that I'm not worthy of being the princess role, all these things. But listening has made me strong. Some would even say stubborn, actually, in my perseverance of being who I am and standing my ground. And I've had my trouble about the facade of being a princess. You know, it's an empty role if you don't fill it with you. And that's for everyone, right? We all think we need to live up to other people's expectations of us, to be accepted, to be loved, when everything we need to do is to fill ourselves from the inside. And that, my friends, is the change we need in the world today. You know, I've seen it in myself. I've been scared. I've been scared of being on stage, scared of being in my power, showing it to others. But I've seen that when I listen and really take in what's here in my heart, that it fills me with self-love. And when I love myself, I start respecting myself and accepting myself. And you know what happens then? You start loving, respecting, and accepting others too. And when you start doing that, judgment goes away. Your guard goes down. And your true senses get turned back on, and you suddenly remember that we're in this together, not as individuals, but as brothers and sisters of the human race. So my question for you is this. Are you ready to open up and start listening so that you too can take action on what you hear and start changing the world? It starts with you and you and you and you. It starts with everyone. I really hope you will take the challenge. Thank you.